will be the tone of our discussion during this afternoon, especially focused on the leaders of today and the leaders of tomorrow. We are fortunate to begin with a keynote by Raul Alfaro Pelico. I hope I pronounced it kind of well. The director of IRENA's Knowledge Policy and Finance Center, who will present key insights from IRENA's last report called based on the UAE Consensus. For that, I'll welcome him on stage, and I ask you a round of applause for him. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Pedro. Thank you. Good evening. Boa tarde. First of all, I want to say thank you to the Portuguese Pavilion for providing this opportunity for IRENA to provide opening remarks. I also want to say thank you to the European Youth and Energy Network, who made sure that I was in this session today. And I'm just really pleased to provide opening remarks. It is my really distinct pleasure to provide the scene setting for today's conversation. When Pedro just mentioned about the challenges that Secretary Guterres has outlined. Now, oftentimes we forget about the opportunities, and this is where the youth really plays a key role. So in order to navigate those challenges, we really need young leaders to engage in this conversation. And so today, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to share some of the key findings from our recent report, which is called Delivering on the UAE Consensus, Tracking Progress Toward Tripling Renewable Energy Capacity and Doubling Energy Efficiency by 2030. This was produced in partnership with the COP28 UAE, COP29 Azerbaijan, and COP30 Brazil presidencies, and the Global Renewables Alliance. So one of the key aspects of this report and one of the key messages is to really underscore that the global energy transition is not just a technical or economic challenge. It is a moral imperative. And as we gather here today, we are reminded of the commitments made under the Paris Agreement. This is a framework that remains the cornerstone of our collective fight against climate change. So keeping global temperature rise within 1.5 is not a distant target, but an urgent necessity, and it will require unwavering political support to achieve it. So the UAE Consensus set at COP28 in Dubai provides a very clear and achievable pathway to reach net zero emissions by the mid-century. So in early 2024, the COP28 presidency designated IRENA as the official custodian agency for tracking the key outcomes of the first global stocktake, which was agreed under the UAE Consensus. It calls on parties to triple renewable power capacity and double the rate of energy efficiency. This report is the first of the 7 editions that will follow to track progress this decade toward these vital goals. So limiting global temperature increase to 1.5 above pre-industrial levels by the end of the century and delivering on the Sustainable Development Goals will both require a very rapid acceleration of the energy transition. So as you can see on the screen here, 2023 was another record-breaking year for renewables. IRENA's data shows that 473 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity was added last year. And that amount represented 87% of the new installed capacity of all energy sources, which is bringing the total installed capacity of renewable energy to 3.9 terawatts. Now, despite this progress, global renewable energy capacity needs to reach 11.2 terawatts by 2030. So that means we need to increase by 1 terawatt of renewable energy needs to be added each year between 2024 and 2030. So significant progress, but not enough. Now, when we look at the different renewable energy sources, except for solar PV, capacity additions for all renewable energy technologies remain below the required levels. Annual capacity additions for onshore wind need to expand by 3 times, offshore wind and bioenergy by 6 times, and geothermal by 35 times. Concentrated solar power and marine energy capacity will also need to increase significantly. In addition to the uneven distribution of the renewable energy additions in terms of renewable energy sources, there is also an uneven geographic distribution. The deployment of renewable energy power capacity remains really skewed towards Asia, as you can see on the screen, Europe and North America. These 3 collective regions accounted for 85% of global installed capacity at the end of 2023. And then when we look at Africa, despite its vast potential and energy needs, the region only accounted for 1.6% of the global share of installed renewable power capacity. Unfortunately, minimal progress has been made on energy efficiency. An annual energy intensity improvement rate of at least 4% is needed between 2023 and 2030 to meet the goal. But the current improvement rate stands at about half of that. This requires urgent actions to increase electrification in end-use sectors, including private and freight transport, buildings, and industry. Electrification is progressing, but not really fast enough. Electric car sales are rising, but more charging infrastructure is needed. So the grave reality is that the energy transition and current ambitions are not on track, and we are at risk of missing our goal. Currently, nationally determined contributions will only add 1.75 terawatt of renewable energy capacity by 2030. 5.4, sorry. When more than 7 terawatt is needed. National policies and plans, on the other hand, will deliver only half of the growth that is needed. So it's not just that the ambitions are very low, but there is also a mismatch between the commitments that countries are making with their NDCs and their national plans. And so we really need to address this gap in the next round of NDCs, the so-called NDCs 3.0. Now, in addition to meeting the objectives in terms of renewable energy capacity, we also need to consider the socioeconomic objectives. For example, meeting the UAE Consensus goal to triple renewable energy will benefit job creation, almost doubling the existing renewable energy sector jobs to reach 30 million jobs by 2030. In 2023, renewable energy employed a new record of 16.2 million, which is the largest growth from year to year. However, to continue achieving the UAE Consensus goals, global investments are pivotal. Investments in renewable energy capacity reach another record of $570 billion in 2023. But we need $31.5 trillion in investment by 2030 in renewables, grids, flexibility, and efficiency. Current investments are also highly uneven and concentrated in advanced economies. And so in 2023, Sub-Saharan Africa, home to 567 million people without access to electricity, energy transition-related investments were 40 times less than the world average per capita. To support Africa's climate and development priorities, IRENA, under the leadership of the Kenyan President Ruto, has launched the Accelerated Partnership for Renewables in Africa, APRA, whose first investment forum was convened in Nairobi last month. Just quickly coming towards the end of the presentation, to keep the Paris Agreement goals alive, the world must significantly ramp up renewable capacity additions in the 6 remaining years of this decade. It is still possible to achieve this goal, but each year the target falls further out of reach. This will require immediate global action to overcome the structural and systemic barriers that impede progress. So this means we need to modernize and expand existing and enabling infrastructure. We also need to work on establishing the policies and regulatory frameworks that will support the renewables. And we also need to build the institutional and human resource capabilities for the energy transition. To overcome these barriers, policymakers must take urgent actions across the 5 main enablers of the energy transition. First, we need policies and regulations to be strengthened to enable the deployment of renewables and energy efficiency measures. Second, we need education, training, reskilling, and upskilling to be prioritized so that we are able to have sufficient human resources needed for the transition. Third, financing must be more accessible and affordable for developing countries. Fourth, achieving these goals will depend on stronger international collaboration. Groups such as the G7 or the G20 must mobilize more support. And finally, modernized infrastructure development must be delivered urgently, including renewable energy generation and grid infrastructure to support the ramping up of renewable power capacity to achieve the 2030 target. Urgent and collective actions across these 5 enablers will give us the best chance of achieving climate, development, and industrialization goals, and help us achieve a more equitable world in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Today, we are here gathered to discuss how young leaders can contribute to our energy transition. And so I want you all to keep these 5 enablers in mind as you consider concrete actions that we can all take. You can scan the QR code there. I saw lots of people taking pictures. This is the good time to take more pictures and just download the publication. And as you do that, I just want to emphasize the energy targets of the UAE Consensus are not merely ambitions. They are central to the success of the Paris Agreement. Achieving them means accelerating our actions and ensuring that our policies, investments, and partnerships are aligned with this shared vision. Together we can and we must build a cleaner, more sustainable future for all, powered by renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Raul. I mean, if you learned something from your presentation, besides all the important information that you gave us, is that at least internal collaboration is already working, and I think that this panel and this audience is proof of that. It was also a very good way to kickstart our discussion that will follow, and I would like to invite the panelists to join me on stage from the second chair onwards, please. So first, Raul Alfaro Pelico, that I know that most of you for sure already know him. Then Julia Seixas, Prorector and Energy Climate Expert at Nova University of Lisbon and President of SDSN Portugal. Joyce Mendes, Secretary General's Youth Climate Advisor. And Federico Barbieri, Youth Energy Transition Commission and President of the European Youth Energy Network. Just to give you a quick look, we are the European Youth Energy Network. For those of you that arrived now, we have a very strong partnership with IRENA. That's why we invited them to do these opening remarks. And thanks again, Raul, for that. We will start now. How about now? Perfect. So something that we thought, I mean, usually in these types of sessions, we usually start with a brief bio introduction on each of the panelists. But this time we thought that it would be more interesting to know their thoughts and their interests. And the question that I would like to start as type of an icebreaker and to engage more our audience would be to ask you, each one of you, to share specific moments or projects, whether something that you experienced in first hand or something that you saw that really inspired you and that you are proud of in advancing the energy transition. I don't know who wants to start.
Maybe something I'm very proud of is trying to explain my mom how the electricity market works. It's very complicated, and I think sometimes we forget that we are all here to learn, right? And we forget about our impact to inspire other people. So it's not something concrete. It's not some installing a PV plants or wind power, but I really enjoy when I inspire people. So I think this is the thing that gives me the most emotions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Federico. I think now we can go to Joyce. I'll just ask Professor if you can change the microphone. I think that's some issue with that one. Oh, it's turned off, I think.
All right.
Perfect.
Yeah, boa tarde. I'm very excited to be here. Yeah, actually, we were commenting a little bit about this with Federica before. With Raul, with everybody actually about this project. Basically, during pandemics, I come actually from NGOs, but also from research areas in the university when I was studying engineering. So we co-founded a youth-led organization. We were doing mainly work in policy and proposing, especially areas in where Latin American countries can collaborate more in order to foster our integration. But especially analyzing the role of youth in that process. We were very theoretical. However, during pandemics, it was a very peculiar situation because several of our members of the organization and the university went back to their house, to their homes. And we lost communication with one of the members, which is Rosana Mamani. She is an indigenous leader from the Peruvian Amazon peoples. And then we were like, what's going on? And it was interesting because she says, guys, you never asked, but I don't have electricity in my community. So basically what we did, it was, okay, we've been learning about this, and we were back then students. Our challenge is going to be supporting that community to electrify themselves if they want to do so. So there were several consultations in the process, and they said, we want to do it with you. And we did it. I mean, after 2 years, but it took so long. And even one of the stories that we're going to be recording in the next installations upgrade is it took us 10 hours from boat, like in the Amazon, because we were having water scarcity. So the river downstream was very slow. So we were like with solar panels and batteries in a boat down the Ucayali River, which is like really pretty much bordered with Peru and Brazil. And when we got to the community, it was like the community says, now that we're going to have electricity and access to the internet, we're going to build the first school in the community. So it seems small, but even access to education and the way how energy can be a catalyzer for this, that for me is still inspiring me, will inspire me always.
Thank you, Joyce. Maybe Professor Julia?
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. I guess I'm taking that. I will share with you a very interesting and quite funny looking now for the back. Around 2010, 2011, my team and myself was coordinating the roadmap for a low-carbon economy in Portugal. By that time, carbon neutrality was not on the agenda. And according to our projections and our modeling exercise, Portugal, regarding the Portuguese energy system, we produced some interesting results. More or less by this time, 2025 or so, we should have in Portugal 100% renewables, and we should close one refinery. But 12 years ago, this was very, very tough for the stakeholders to accept things like that. So my team was called for a very tough conversations with the stakeholders, namely with the electricity transmission operator and also with our Galp company. It was very tough. But anyway, we explained the rationale of the thing. We kept the results, the technical, and I have to say the Ministry of Environment kept and backed that results. And guess what? 10 years later, we have been 100% renewables in the power system in Portugal for several days in a row, and one refinery is closed. So I guess that we have, when looking to the future, indeed, we don't have to be afraid of the science and the rationale of the goals should put on the table. So I think that by that time, this roadmap was for the first time, I think it was for a very, let's say, inspiring, or at least put deep decarbonization options for the different stakeholders to confront with those options to the future.
Thank you, Professor. So we've been through a personal opinion, we've discussed energy poverty. Now we know that we can reach the targets that we put on ourselves. Raul, would you like to complement the information about the personal experience that you had?
Thank you. Actually, it's very interesting because you talked about refineries. It's a very long story, but I'm going to try and summarize it. So my proudest moment, it's been in this city today, and I'll explain why. When my father was born and studied in Equatorial Guinea, which is where I'm originally from. This is a small country in the west central part of Africa, and the capital city is in an island. My father comes from a small island further out, next to Sao Tome and Principe. That's a fishing village. And so my grandfather, who was able to get a job in the capital city, then was able to pay for studies for my father, all the way to higher education. And then at that point, he wasn't able to, if we're speaking about youth, he wasn't able to study at university. By chance, he was invited to join a mission to go to China, which is where I happened to be last week. And in that mission, he happened to play very good table tennis. China likes ping pong. And so just because he played very good ping pong, then on the way back to Equatorial Guinea, he was asked, you're very good with ping pong. What are you doing right now? And he said, well, I just finished high school. I would love to study at university, but I just don't have the resources to do so. So the government of Equatorial Guinea gave him a scholarship. And they gave him a scholarship to study in the Soviet Union. So he came first to Kiev, then Moscow, and then finally he arrived here in Baku, which is one of the reasons why I'm very proud to be here. And the link to your story is that he became a petrochemical engineer, and his biggest dream was to build a refinery. So it's very coincidental that he just mentioned that. And what is the other thing that is very interesting is that although he was a petrochemical engineer, when he went back home, his first project was a hydropower facility. And so this link between Baku and China, it's very strong because last week I was in a very small, what used to be a very small village, fishing village, which today has 40% of production of EV batteries. So 25 years ago, this village that I was in last week was the poorest village in the Fujian province of China, and today produces batteries for Tesla, BMW, 40% of the global market. So there is this connection in the transition, and there is also the navigation that we as individuals can make with our skills, with our education. And when you look at the future, today we might be doing what we're doing right now. We just had a session about skills, but when you look at the future, you don't know what you're going to do next. And I think this is, for me, it's a call of hope to the youth who, just like me, when I was studying at university, I didn't really know what to study. You don't have to choose your path already. You can navigate it. You might end up being involved in the energy transition. That's my proudest moment.
Perfect. It's always very good to hear such inspiring stories. That was my opinion. When we were discussing this topic, it's way better to hear these stories than to hear a boring bio. So we accomplished that with this part for sure. So picking up on something that Professor Julia said, we were discussing about the targets. At least from a youth point of view, we hear a lot we have targets for 2030, we have targets for 2045, targets for 2050. Lots of acronyms in the middle. It becomes sometimes very, very, very confusing, and it's hard to keep up with all of these targets that have such an urgency behind them. At all the moment. So it's kind of a spam of targets, spam of acronyms. And it's hard to keep up a balance between urgency and implementation of those targets. How do you see these? And is there any recommendation that you'd like to give us in order to maintain this balance? Okay, track the progress well, but at the same time maintain engagement from the communities and from society.
It's for me. Okay. Yes, it's true. And I think people, and when I refer people, I'm referring to citizens first, on the first place. And citizens are becoming quite confusing and tired of such discourse of targets then and so. And I think there is something to do that is not yet done, and we have the opportunity to develop it. This question of targets and modeling exercises to the future and reports, just like IRENA has presented, or from many other organizations, these are prepared and well prepared for a specific ecosystem of people. And they are okay. I mean, and regarding the targets, I mean, the policymakers, they have to be pushed for targets. Otherwise, I have the feeling that the system will not move for the direction that we want. But a completely different thing is to engage citizens. I mean, other part of the people that are not in our ecosystem of the energy system. And taking that in account, I think there is so few things to communicate with people and to engage them for this stuff. For example, how to track the progress of the things that we are doing. At this moment, we have poor things to do. I mean, important, but not sufficient. Statistics. But statistics, I mean, it's 1 year late or 2 years late. And this is one thing. Another thing is that they call about numbers, and people don't understand what are 50 gigatons of CO2. What is this about? I mean, my friends that don't work in this area, they don't understand this. So there is a huge opportunity and a urgent need to develop tools based on digital tools, I mean, with augmented reality or whatever. I'm not expert in the field, but I feel that we need tools to make almost real time. I'm not sure if you have the capacity, the capability to have indeed real time, but almost real time, the impact of the actions we are doing or we do not doing. To make visible the CO2 emissions, for example, because people don't know what this is about. CO2 emissions are not visible. So, I mean, there are so many opportunities for startups to communicate this stuff with the different people that I think that we have to go ahead in this direction as well in order to keep them informed, aware, and engaged. And interested in the subject. Otherwise, this is stuff for policymakers or politics and for the experts and nothing more.
I think that's a good motto for a T-shirt: informed, aware, and engaged. We'll think about that. And this is very interesting. I mean, COP30, COP. When we are in events like this, COP29, and we were also discussing targets before, I think that sometimes, especially when we create these targets, it's hard to avoid some solutions like one size fits all. And it's even harder when some of the best examples are in countries completely different from others. So as IRENA, and what is IRENA's strategy and advocacy to ensure adaptable and locally effective approaches to solve local problems effectively?
Thank you, Pedro. Sorry, I learned this because I've done so many panels, and they told me that if you put your hand here,
no, thanks a lot.
It blocks the voice, and I've been doing it myself today, so I'm still learning. Thank you for the question about one size fits all. I think, first of all, let's start with the division that I'm proud to lead. It's called Knowledge, Policy, and Finance Center. And I have some staff members here who I'm giving them a warning that I'm going to put them on the spot because some of in my team, I have lots of statisticians. So
they are very needed.
They are the best people. Their job is very important. You need to look at the future, but you also need to look at the present and the past, because otherwise you don't know where you are. However, when I joined IRENA in March, the first thing that came to my mind is, okay, knowledge is important, but what is really important is know-how. It needs to be applied, right? Now, policies, and I've talked about policies earlier, right? And we need policies. We need to update the NDCs. We need to have the targets translated into measures. But right now, if we want to accelerate the energy transition, we need to move from policies to permits. We need to unlock some of the investments, and many of the investments are actually waiting for some process in some administration to be approved. And then the last thing is, finance. That's the last letter in our acronym. And yes, everybody's talking about finance, but at the end of the day, the money is there, as we have heard as well. But in the end, there is behind that decision, the financial decision, there is a final investment decision that needs to be made. And this is where the problem is. Sometimes people don't really know whether to invest in a particular country. You saw the figures for Africa. And so in order to really advance the tripling target, you really need to adapt those, know-how, permits, and final investment decisions to the context. It only happens in a context. Some of the tools that we use, in addition to statistics, we use resource assessments, we use lots of mapping that we do. We use solar simulators, solar city simulator for rooftop PV installations, particularly in small island development states. But then we also use different policy tools, such as auctions. I think Portugal is a country that has done a lot of auctions. But in addition to the policy measure, is ensuring that in those auctions there are criteria that favor investment that have the biggest impact, environmental, social, and governance impact. And we have many examples around the world. Then in terms of finance, I think it's important to really understand, when we talk about finance, that there are different types of finance. And also, you would have heard about risks and the risking mechanisms, such as guarantees. But there are also other policy, the risking instruments, as we call them at IRENA, that don't actually involve finance, but involve other types of interventions that are needed to remove the risks of investment. Part of the lack of investment in Africa that I just depicted, in fact, doesn't have to do with lack of a guarantee. It just happens to do with just simply an absence of a policy, or a lack of knowledge, or lack of trained individuals. And you need to invest in those. And these are policy de-risking instruments. The last point that I'll make is about perception, because a lot of those investment decisions, always talk about risk. It's very risky to invest in Africa. It's very risky to invest in certain parts of the world. But then we have done analysis that shows that the real risks associated to some of those investments is far smaller than the perceived risks. It's Africa, it's difficult, it's dangerous, and that is where we need to address misinformation, because oftentimes, you would have heard that, the higher the risk, the higher the reward, and oftentimes that risk is just really perceived. So some of the tools that we use as well is trying to address that misinformation, that perception, so that, the risk of the investment is considered lower, the cost of capital becomes lower, and therefore the chance of investment is higher.
That's so true. I mean, one of the best solutions that I've met so far, and that's actually one of the conclusions from our previous panel, it was we need to get close, we need to involve all the stakeholders, we need to get closer to the communities. And someone that I know that has an extensive experience with communities is Joyce. Joyce, I'd like to understand something. I mean, we talk a lot about values, we talk a lot about energy transition, but sometimes values can be compromised by the energy transition. And what I want to understand from your experience and from your perspective is, how can we focus on the energy transition? How can we reach the goals that we are talking about without compromising social inclusion, social equity? Can you share a little bit of your experience on this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as a practitioner, I always like to put examples and to explain a little bit. I think I'm going to speak without this because it's distracting. So yeah, basically, I think one of the aspects that, as well Raul was mentioning, is capacity building and training. So I had the opportunity to meet communities across the triangle of lithium. which is an area of Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina and Latin America. It's well known. It's one, I think, the biggest reservoir of lithium in the world. So it was interesting community. So we did several consultations because we also wanted to see the perspectives of the communities as we wanted to help them mapping their energy needs. And it was crazy because some people were associating having lithium or lithium mining as lack of water. So this was completely shocking. And then other perspectives were like, we know that it has a value abroad, but we cannot access it. And then I was talking, okay, why? And specifically for the case of Latin America, one thing is to have a mineral. Another thing is to have a battery. Right? We are buying technology. We're using our minerals, and then we buy technology, foreign technology, when we have huge rates of unemployment, which is the case now for Argentina, which is a contradiction. We should be training youth and giving them option, right, to be able to be competitive at the energy market. And we should be hiring Latin American professionals in our own region to be able as well to tackle unemployment. Because at the same time, we see there is a lot of options and as well in the energy sector in Latin America. But you see, they ask you a bunch of requirements sometimes for you to access to those job offers, and sometimes ask you 10 years of experience, masters, this and that, and you're like, okay, and then you have other, other organizations and other youth from other regions, and we can compete with that. In the other hand, at the same time, I think there is the part of consultancy and participatory, consultancy for the communities, because sometimes energy projects, even if they are renewable, like in the case as well of Brazil has a lot of hydro. It is renewable, good, but that doesn't mean that it's being sustainable for the community, for even the region. And there are even lack of frameworks of these consultations. How is it the community agree? If not, are we proposing an alternative solution regarding their situation with the territory as well, right? And we have huge cases as well recently with the expansion of the hydroelectrical plants in Brazil, and we understand it is renewable, but that doesn't mean it's being sustainable at a longer term. And even the installed capacity that they were promising, it doesn't reach the full potential because of the water crisis. So it's we need to put, obviously, everything in a balance and understand that there are different realities for energy transitions in different communities around the world. There are different perspectives as well of what just energy transition means for certain communities. And perhaps to bring to the story that I was saying at the beginning is that for Rosanna's community, someone told us, why you didn't install a diesel generator? It's way easier. You took the burden of learning on how to do sciencing, we were having the information in English, so we had to translate it to Spanish, and then to Quechua. Why you took the burden of doing that? And then, doing the full process? Because that's what the community wanted, and that's what it makes sense as well for the reality to go with renewables in that case. So it's an interesting point because it seems that while tackling climate change, giving access to electricity, training as well youth, the pathway they selected was renewables. And the funny thing is that the story where this community is located, it is in a region that is called the Camisea extraction region, which is the biggest nat gas extraction region of Peru. But the communities around that, they don't have access of electricity. So I think that the question that I want to leave as well to the audience, and that I also been asked several times when I work with communities, is this energy transition happening for whom, how, and what's the future that we want to reach? And I think that's what we're trying to decide here at COP. We're trying to decide a common goal, a common future. And as my boss says, the Secretary General, he says, right, what is that future agenda? And we have, I think, the same question from the Future Summit that we just came from New York. And we understand that energy transition and just energy transition is not an option, but it's a must.
Amazing, and I loved hearing your stories and experiences, and they truly are the best way to showcase this. And if I may add, one of the main struggles of local communities, local communities by themselves, it's already difficult to keep up and to meet the requirements, but if you are a youth on those local communities, the struggles are way bigger. Federico, doing here the bridge for youth, I know that you are used on your daily job to work with more experienced professionals. At the same time, you work with a lot of young professionals. Do you see similarities on the way they approach issues, the way they approach the energy transition? Do you think that there is alignment between them, or there's still a bridge to needing to be built in this sense?
So just for the context, I have a double identity. So during the day, I'm an energy market professional, and during the night, I'm a youth activist. Like Batman, basically. Maybe before answering the question, I think we should stop putting label to people, because when I think about young professional, I think about disconnected from age. Okay, young is somebody that is learning, no, is starting to learn. Veterans is not someone that is old. It's someone that has a lot of experience. You can be young veterans as well if you start learning from 10 years old. And that is something that I think we all have in common, which is, I mentioned it before, which is about education. You know, I educate my mom, and my mom is a young professional when she starts learning about something new. And before the panel, I just asked ChatGPT, to depict me a picture of what education is. And what I see is basically a picture with a not so old person, but a lot of young people around. And ChatGPT is influenced by perception as well. And I believe that that picture should have like also industry veterans in it, because we all need to learn. We all have something new to learn. So this is what I think we should normalize older people, industry veterans, to go to universities to learn about new topics. And because I don't know, Julia, what's your perspective? Yeah, because usually you think of university, it's weird for an old person to go to university, isn't it? Yes. So we need to normalize. And why do we need to do that? Because we need to upskill, we need to reskill. So we need to enable not just young people, but also like more experienced people to change their careers. And this is what I think we have in common. What is diverging? Young people want rapid change, but sometimes they are not aware of the constraints. When I was younger, I was saying, okay, I want 100% renewables now, tomorrow, which is not possible, right? It needs to have a transition. That's why we call it transition, right? It's not something that we can switch from a day to the night. And this is what I think veterans should teach young people. Okay, this is something we need to do gradually. I know we are slow, I know we are late. It's something we need to do gradually. But our role as young people is to, okay, why is it so slow? Where can we be faster? So I see this double role. And really, I encourage everyone here, go to your home and explain to your parents what you're learning. Okay, I have zero patience with my mom when she asks me, teach me how to use my phone and everything. But we should not behave like that. We should dedicate time to educate young people. Old people should dedicate time. As old people dedicate time to educate young people, also young people should dedicate more time with older people. Because we are approaching a polarization of society. We are growing even more and more divided. So also what we are trying to do at the European Energy Network is to develop solutions that bring not just youth at the table, but youth and all the different stakeholders around the table. And this is crucial, because we really need to have everybody at the table. And I think this is the role, it's our role of youth, right? Not just think about youth, but think about solutions that works for everyone and helps academic institutions, that help intergovernmental agencies, that helps government. So let's stop thinking in bubbles. Let's start thinking more together.
Amazing. Very well. Something that I think that can turn some of the conclusions and some of the learnings slower is the complexity of the information. I mean, and this makes me think, and I'd like to ask Raul one question. I mean, IRENA gladly is a very data-driven intergovernmental agency. But at the same time, you have a very good reputation when you build that information. What I would like to understand is there any learnings that you've had so far on how to explain complex themes, complex situations to younger generations?
Thank you. Well, first I wanna. I'm happy that you didn't use me as an example for a veteran, so that means I'm still young. And therefore, one thing that we know that young people can do is we can understand very complex information and really boil it down into simple terms. So that's something that we, young at heart, like many of you, can do. And one tool that IRENA has used very recently is the Italy IRENA Action for Climate Toolkit, IACT, which has allowed 6,000 young people in 42 countries to really have access to information, materials, toolkits, PowerPoints, in very easy to understand means, so that then the information can be passed on. So that's something that I would use as an example. It's a toolkit, and right now what we're going to do is open the next call for applications, because we see that there's a lot of demand. So I would use that as an example.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. The time is running short, and the information, the learnings that we are getting here are very, very good. To enter in the final round, Mr. Julia, very briefly, if you can sum it up. What will be your best advice to young professionals to balance some of their idealism with the pragmatism to reach climate goals?
Okay. I would like to underline everything is just said. I think the point at this moment is not only share information, the good information to the young people. This is absolutely needed, but what we need is to have a place in the negotiation table, a place in the decision-making process. We have here in front of us a person that is in the decision-making process, and we do not have at this moment institutional processes to include the young people in the decision-making process. The question is about young and veteran. This is about experience and information, but this is also a kind of the problem is the mindset, because sometimes I find some young people with some business as usual mindset and some veteran people with very revolutionary and transformative mindset. So we cannot put this type of labels. I think the best way is to integrate these different generations, because one thing is for sure, we have to break down the business as usual and accelerate to a different thing. And for that, the point is incentivize the young people to engage with concrete initiatives, because, for example, I used to hear in Portugal some young people asking for carbon neutrality in 2030. This is impossible. I mean, shut up. This is not possible. This is done. This is put in words by people that are completely not aware about what this is about. So make the young people engage with that. But also in the other part of the coin, I mean, you have to require and demand the decision-making process also to include the young people from the beginning, to hear them, to co-create and analyze with them targets and all the process.
And you can count with us for
yeah.
So to finalize and to close our panel, Joyce, we've been talking a lot about top-bottom approach. Oh, my bad. Can you hear me better now? Sorry. Joyce, we've been talking about a lot of top-bottom approaches, but sometimes the bottom-up approach is also very important. As someone that is used to these high-level meetings, these high-level speeches, would you have any advice to our fellow youth that is present here on how to engage and how to speak on those specific meetings and how to make the youth voice heard?
Yeah, of course. And I think taking the point from Professor, we understood that, especially I see from my youth perspective, but also from my organization, in life and in work, they're not going to give you, like the opportunity because you're just a young person, but because you know what you're doing, you know the information and you're good at it as well. And maybe you happen to be young at the same time, right? Because that's the point. And I have seen that, especially not just in this space, but in other space as well, of the diplomacy negotiations, you need to know the certain, data and get updated. There are amazing reports, and we use a lot of IRENA's reports in order to talk even to parliamentarians, because you see, one of the conversations we were also having with Deputy General Amina Mohamed is that we have these indices, and these indices are very related as well to energy, and we know that. The point is how they're going to be implemented. We're not going to be able to do it without parliamentarians, and sometimes they don't want to say, I don't understand. But we, youth, we can be there as well purposively. Hey, we're going to help you in the implementation. We can support you. And maybe not just demanding. You see, there is a huge demand on even mentioning children and youth in the indices and having us in consultations, but we can go to consultations without understanding as well, and without having, updated information. So I think it's a call. I think you guys are doing it, and it's the way, get updated information, but also be agile in the information that you talk either to negotiators or policymakers. Better, yeah, or policymakers. Yeah, thank you. Oh, sorry. Be able to, we still have a week, and we cannot wait to COP30 in Brazil. We need to get to COP30 already with specific funding. If we're talking now about loans, because I have seen that, is specifically how it's going to work, how it's going to impact, and especially more ambition in the indices. And we are here, as again, we talk also about SDGs, right? And we think 2030, like we were, I was in high school still, when it was 2015 when they were announced already. And it's like going time really, really fast. We still have 16% done of the indices, and we cannot just keep, losing intention and track of this. We need to put the ambition, but also support and work locally. And I think one of the things that I have seen is youth being kind of the arms of, as well, governments in application, for example, of national plans of adaptation, even electrification plans, going to the territories and reaching further. So I think that this is a moment of really catalyzing working together, because we really need it.
Okay, I think that we couldn't end with a better statement, I would say. Again, so you can see that NGOs are ready, intergovernmental agencies are ready, academics are ready, youth is ready. So a challenge that we leave for the decision makers, obviously, is we are ready, so count on us to deliver these goals. Thank you all for being here today. I hope to see you very soon. Thank you.
Moderation. I know it's a challenge with the time always, but well done.
Yes, can we take a picture?